It's interesting in the wake of the Mario Kart World is too expensive discourse that Nintendo did the exact opposite. They released a low budget game on the Nintendo eShop for 20 bucks and sold it to you. And that game is, of course, Dragon Drive. We also had like Welcome Tour, which also was pretty solid and did a pretty good job like teaching us all about the console. But Dragon Drive is something that a lot of people were very skeptical of when it was first shown off. This was something that a lot of people thought would be lazy, low effort, a cash grab, something that wouldn't be worth your time or attention, and that's what the critics are trying to tell you. I am seeing people seriously argue that they should have brought back arms instead of doing this, and I think that really just goes to show you just how much of an impact ARMS actually had on the Nintendo community. Is that like we're now at the point where people are asking for a sequel, after coping and seething about that game back in 2017. Like Dragon Drive, I think is the Nintendo Switch's answer to ARMS. It is the evolution of the Wii Sports formula. This is motion controls taken to the next level. And I think people don't really look at it in that way. They kind of see it as cheap and lazy, but upon actually playing this game and seeing how cool it is to move around within your wheelchair and like, you push your Joy-Cons against your legs and you start like, shifting about. You can like wave your hands realistically with the Joy-Con controls. Like what we have here is proof that first of all that motion controls haven't gone anywhere and are still very relevant on Nintendo consoles. And two, just how much more sophisticated the Joy-Con 2 is than any PC mouse. You know, like you don't have any PC gamers that use two different mice. Like you don't have games that take advantage of like two different mice that you like, use to navigate your RTS menus. Like no, you just use hotkeys. Uh, PC gaming is stuck in the past. Dragon Drive is proof that the Nintendo Switch 2 Joy-Con is superior to the traditional PC mouse because you can use it in all manner of situations. You can use it as a motion control. You can use it, as a mouse. You can use it like in all manner of positions. Like for Dragon Drive, like the recommended position is like just using it on your leg, and it's shocking how well it works. Like seeing this technology be put into action really brings me back to when Wii Sports was brand new. It really does feel like the same exact design philosophy from that series went into Dragon Drive. This is essentially Nintendo Switch Sports 2. If you wondered why Switch Sports like added in basketball like all of a sudden like 2 years later, I do think it was prepping for this. Because if you play Dragon Drive, you can see that like a lot of like very Wii Sports influenced kind of design philosophies went into this, with like the being entirely motion control, with like the vibe and the personality. Like it does feel very, 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 very much Wii Sports inspired, and is a really good showcase of the technology. So, with that being said, is the game good? Being a $20 game on the eShop, yes, absolutely. Like you're playing other people online. Yeah, there's a lot of strategy to it. There's a lot of technical depth to it. There's a lot of skill involved. You will be playing this game endlessly. Just like ARMS, just like Wii Sports, right? This is something that you will come back to time and time again to get better at it and to master these unique controls. It's like Star Fox Zero. It's like Wii Sports. It's like Nintendo Switch Sports. It is that kind of experience, and it's very appalling to me to see so many people like try and say this game is a failure, that it's not very good, or that like you should buy something else. Like the reality is, this is a new Nintendo game on the Nintendo Switch 2 that really showcases its unique technological prowess. This is not a game that is available on any other platform. It is completely unemulatable on PC because of how the controls work. Much like Star Fox Zero before it, it is so intrinsically tied to the hardware and the way the game was played that emulation is completely and utterly impossible. That's just the reality of it. So Dragon Drive is a really interesting example of, I think, of just how much of how beyond other developers Nintendo is. Because last month we got like Donkey Kong Bonanza, which was this really intense, like fast-paced action adventure game, like 3D platformer featuring Donkey Kong, super super hardcore game, 40 hours of content, and then we get this, then we get like Kirby and the Forgotten Land. Like we're getting dozens and dozens of great Switch 2 games all the time. And the simple fact of the matter is, this is another Nintendo Switch Sports situation. This is a game that, in spite of all the bleeding online about how much it sucks and how much they hate it, it is going to do very, very well commercially. It's already on the bestsellers page on the eShop, right? And I think as more people like spend time with it and play it and realize how much fun it actually is, all the rage about it is going to subside. And I do think it's worth pointing out like just how inane and ridiculous like the complaints actually are. If you look at them, the visuals look great. When you're actually playing the game, they don't look washed out, they don't look ridiculous, they don't look try hard or edgy. They very much look like a Nintendo game, right? I like the way Dragon Drive looks. The idea of wheelchair basketball, right? A lot of people were put off by the idea, but because of the way the game works, it really gives it a very unique kind of style and vibe. Something that is going to lead, I think, to a very competitive, interesting meta and just a competitive scene. Dragon Drive is going to be it is a very interesting experimental game on Nintendo's part. It's something that really demonstrates that they are trying to innovate on the tired sports genre, that they are moving away from like the Madden, the FIFAs, like the stuff like that. That's the same thing over and over again. Dragon Drive is a really interesting example. It's a sports game, but very much unlike anything else we've ever played. It's a sports game at a $20 price tag. It is a Nintendo Switch 2 exclusive that is being sold for 20 bucks. So I think this might be a really interesting game to pick up if you're interested in sports, if you're interested in Nintendo Switch Sports, if you like, this kind of thing. Like, this is absolutely something you should pick up and enjoy. I am very much enjoying my time with Dragon Drive.